guess weird job, it's all in the eye of the beholder. I don't think I've ever had a really weird job, but that all depends on what your view of a weird job is. Cooking, food prep, landscaping, personal training, stocking shelves, being an author, a writer, a podcaster. You could think any of those are weird. For this week, though, I did my best to research actual weird jobs. I'm thinking that most of these that I talk about, you're going to look at and say, that couldn't have been a real thing. The best part about this, some of these jobs are still going on now, so you could go and apply for these. And these jobs that are still available to this day, I'd love to know if any of you have heard of them, or God, if any of you know people that have had the job. As with most of these top fives, there are some honorable mentions, and the actual top five is in no particular order. And the honorable mentions, I'll try to fly through, but I'm going to have to give a little description to some of these jobs because I don't think you'll understand what they are just from the name. A heads up, a few of these are pretty gross. So if you're eating right now, maybe put down the food. Honorable mentions for the weirdest jobs ever, at least the weirdest I could find so far, include Tosher, which was basically someone who went into the sewers and scavenged for things that might have been dropped, like coins or jewelry. I don't know where the name came from, but it's someone who sifts through raw sewage to find pennies and stuff. Oh, God, we're off to a good start here. Another honorable mention is pet food taster. This is still a current job, and you pretty much get the idea of what it is. So if you think the smell of some cat and dog foods are terrible, imagine having to taste it to make sure it had real beef and chicken flavor. Another honorable mention is funeral clown. This was Greek and Roman times, where a man would be hired to be a clown, dance and act around at a funeral. But the big key was he didn't have regular makeup on his face. He had a mask that was made of the deceased person's face. So it's like hiring Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre to come dance around at the funeral for your grandmother. Another honorable mention, and like I said, put down your food. It's groom of the stool. This was in jolly old England 1,000 years ago. People that would help the monarchs, the royalties, go to the bathroom, clean up the king, and also clean up the toilet seat, which looked more like a padded throne with a hole in it. Ugh. And the last honorable mention is something called a knock-knobbler. Take a moment and think, what do you think a knock-knobbler is? Give up? It was a person hired by the church to eject unruly children and dogs from the church. The first thing I thought of when I saw this was, why were there so many dogs running around in church that they needed to be thrown out? And I don't know where the name knock-knobbler came from. Man, it took a lot to get through those honorable mentions. Let's get into the actual top five. Looking at them, these are less gross than some of the honorable mentions. Now, I say that, and we're going to start off with number one, and I'll be going against it already. Weirdest jobs ever. Number one is panda fluffer. This is a job you can still have to this day. No, fluffer doesn't mean to wash the panda and blow dry their fur so they look all nice and fluffy. This is to help the pandas get aroused so that they can mate, because pandas are endangered. So you need them to mate and have little pandas. In reading some of the descriptions of this job, it is said that people use feather dusters and extreme caution to get pandas in the mood. Now, before you wonder why people would get into a job like this, tickling pandas' privates to get them excited, these people can make close to $30,000 a year fluffing pandas. So it's not great money. And you could get mauled by a panda, or worse if it gets excited. How about a slightly less dangerous job? Number two is human scarecrow. I saw this and thought this would have been something I would have made a skit of with my camcorder with my friends in high school. Ralphie the Human Scarecrow and his adventures. Sorry to disappoint some of you, but human scarecrow does not mean that you're hung on a pole with a hat on and straw. You're more of a person that is in a field and you either play music or ring a cowbell or just yell at the birds when they show up. So it's not that less crazy than you think, just slightly. This is a job that you can have to this day. And human scarecrows, they make typically just over $300 a week. I don't know what the hours are, if it's sun up to sundown. But for the most part, it seems like you get paid to sit in a field and read a book. Which isn't bad unless you're there from sun up to sundown. Then it's not worth it. So you could fluff pandas. You could scare birds away in a field. You want something a little more fun? How about number 3? Dog surfing instructor. Yes, this is a real job that you can get to this day. I'm shocked to find that there's a market for surfing dogs. I mean, I get people that own dogs want to bring them everywhere, put them in a bag and walk them around a store, have them in their shopping cart, or put them in the little wheeled carriage and ride them behind the bike on a bike trail. But bringing your dog with you to surf on the water? The crazy thing, if you have the skill to train a dog to surf, you can make anywhere from $20 to $50 an hour. $50 an hour to teach a dog to surf? Out of all the jobs thus far that I've talked about, this one takes the most skill because you have to know how to surf, A. You have to know canine behavior. I'm assuming for the most part this takes place down in warmer climates, summer resort areas, because I've yet to see on Cape Cod any calls in the local newspapers or job sites for dog surfing instructors. So despite it paying well, it seems like it's a very niche kind of job. Because honestly, I have to watch my money just with groceries and bills. I don't have money to teach my dog how to surf if I had a dog. Speaking of niche jobs, how about number 4? Scuba diving pizza delivery. This is real. This is something that you can apply for, but obviously it's very limited where you can do it. It has to be where there's an underwater resort. The most famous is Jules Undersea Lodge in Key Largo, Florida. To stay there, you've got to put on a wetsuit and dive 30 feet under the water to get to your room. These rooms cost up to $1,700 a night. Oh, but don't worry, you can get pizza delivered underwater. That's where the scuba diving pizza delivery person comes in. For this, obviously, the biggest skill you have to have is scuba diving certificate, some comfort in diving, some experience with that, and maybe even some experience with hospitality. According to an article I read from 2023, you could make as little as $9 an hour doing this. $9 to $25 an hour. So it does not seem like a profitable career. You're not going to retire off of your money you made doing scuba diving pizza delivery. But hey, at least you know if you're going on a delivery with your pizza, you're not going to get robbed going to some abandoned building in the middle of nowhere. It's an underwater resort. Last but not least on this week's Top 5 Weirdest Jobs Ever, this might be the scariest one. Number 5 is a barber surgeon. This I don't think is around anymore, I'm pretty sure, but it is exactly what it sounds like. Someone that cuts your hair, but also does minor surgery, dentistry. This was in the Middle Ages, so nothing recent. But this was back when barbers had those straight razors. So I don't know if people thought, well, if they've got skills with a razor to shave your face without cutting your throat, maybe they can do some surgery. So in the Middle Ages, you could have gone into a barber shop, got a little bit off the top and the sides, got a tooth pulled, maybe get your arm amputated. This is all real. These are things that barbers were qualified to do in the Middle Ages. Like a little off the sides and can you please amputate my foot? Interestingly, a big reason why there were barber surgeons is because physicians at the time found themselves to be above surgery. Like that was below them. And they did more academic work than actually getting their hands dirty, saving people's lives. Could you imagine going to a doctor now and needing surgery, and the doctor brings you to a barber shop and says, there you go. So there you have it. Some of the weirdest jobs ever. Some you can still get today, some that are thankfully long gone. Which of these was the weirdest for you?